industrialization. Many of the speakers highlighted the importance of creating that value addition in the countries with the energy transition. And this initiative is very much focusing on those dimensions. And we are starting with the first cohort of 6 countries with high ambition for renewables, including Kenya, with this initiative, supported by Denmark, Germany, and United Arab Emirates, and several partners we work with. Also, another initiative we are starting at COP28. This is more about lives and livelihoods and how we can put people and communities in the center of energy transition, and how we can integrate those renewable energy solutions into health and agri-food value chains, creating value, stimulating economic activity, and help alleviating poverty. We have been closely working with the parliamentarians under the IRENA context. We have created platforms like Legislators Forum, Legislators Dialogue, having meetings, gatherings to hear from you, from the insights, and how we can promote renewables, because we consider parliaments and parliamentarians in the center of energy transition. They have a key role, and how we can create those structures to have a dialogue among parliamentarians, to share good practices, but also hear from you on the best way of taking forward energy transition discussions at the parliamentary context. And we are very much looking forward to deepening this dialogue.
Should we extend time? Yeah. You can extend time. Okay. Just to explain the system here, I'm sorry you were cut off now. We just implemented a timekeeping instrument here, which is this flashlight that I was just explaining how it works. It is green for the first 3 minutes that you are talking, right? And then after 3 minutes, it turns yellow. And like 20 seconds before the 5 minutes that you have are up, it will turn red. Just for you to see, but I didn't explain that beforehand, so we'll give you a bit of time to finish your presentation. Sorry for cutting you off.
No problem. I was almost at the end of my intervention. I was just saying that we are very much looking forward to deepening cooperation with the parliaments and parliamentarians, because they are extremely important player in our discussions, and how we can promote and advance energy transition discussions in the parliament, and creating the right enabling frameworks and right initiatives is extremely important, and we value that cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gonu, for your input. We heard very well how important the role of renewable energy is for development, and for poverty eradication, energy access, and that renewable energies are becoming mainstream globally, but yet for Africa, more pace in the deployment of renewables needs to be developed, and people need to be put in the center of the transition. And I know that Honorable Bärbel Höhn puts that very often in the focus of her speeches, to put people in the center of the transition. So that leads me to her, and I welcome her to give her input now. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Joachim. Before I start with maybe my experience from Africa, I would like to tell you some data from Germany and the conclusion of that. So 2 years ago, we had a new federal government in Germany, and this government was very engaged with renewables. So they eliminated blockades and obstacles and bureaucracy, and we can now see the result, because renewables are expanding. For example, in 2022, nearly 10 gigawatt were installed with the renewables in the last year in Germany. 10 gigawatt in 2022, and that's really a huge number. New installed renewable energies, most of them photovoltaic. And the first 8 months of this year, till the end of August, 9.5 gigawatt were installed photovoltaic, wind turbines, renewables. That means in this year we will have more than 10 gigawatt installed in Germany in 1 year of renewables. And that means that we had in the first 8 months of this year, 59% of our electricity mix is coming from renewables. And that's a big number because we produced about 300 terawatt hours in Germany in this 8 months. And that's a tremendous number. So what I would like to say, we are doing not enough. We must be more ambitious in Germany, but we are on track. And what I would like to say is that in some sectors we are doing nothing, and especially in the transport sector. I think it's very important if the minister of this sector is really interested and engaged, or if not, or if he is very close to the fossil industry and fossil vehicles. And we can see that in the transport sector. So that means, as conclusion, most important is the political will. The political will is most important, not only in Germany, but in all countries I visited. And when I worked here in Africa as special representative for energy in Africa, I visited 15 countries. And I think there are 3 very important points, and I would like to debate with you. What do you think about that? Are the really very important points? To my view, they are very important points. The first one is training. We need to train the people. We have the same problem in Germany. We have the same problem in every country. But we need vocational training, not only academic, but vocational training, praxis training, experts that can install photovoltaic, experts that are really going to the ground, going to the households and are installing photovoltaic or wind turbines. We have in Germany something like the dual system, practical training and then in companies and added theoretical training in schools. And that was a good idea in Germany, but as I said, we need young people who are interested and work in the sector, and that means for the society that we must recognize that these professions are very important for the state, for the inhabitants. It's not only the academic professions, but also the very practical ones. Second, to me it's very important, when we are talking about renewables and decentralized renewables, we have to go to the ground. And the ground, there are the people, there are small and medium-sized companies, there are municipalities, there are cooperatives, and we have to work with them together, because one of the main points is good maintenance. When we are installing decentralized systems, it's not only the installation, but also the good maintenance and the sustainable operating system. And that's why we need the local entrepreneurs, that's why we need the local level, and that's why we need a bit knowledge, because we need also good quality of the hardware.
I'm sorry, the time is up, but of course I'm happy to give you another minute to finish your talk.
Maybe. Oh, okay, I was the first one. I have to learn about that. So only the last sentence, we have to look for financial systems that included all these ideas, especially of maintenance, because otherwise we will fail. And we can talk about these financial systems in the debate. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bärbel Höhn. And since I also come from Germany, I can copy every point you made. I experienced as well in the photovoltaics industry how important it is now to train people to go to the ground and have different financial systems working. Thank you very much. Now we come further to honorable members of parliament from the African continent, and it's my pleasure and honor to invite Honorable Biyika Lawrence Songa. He's a member of parliament from Uganda and chair of the Climate Change Committee. The floor is yours, if you like.
Thank you very much, moderator. My name is Bika Lawrence Songa, the chair of the Climate Change Committee in Uganda. And I'm happy that we have a big delegation here led by my deputy, Honorable Jacinta Atuto. They may stand. A big delegation from Uganda. Thank you. The three areas of my conversation. One is the focus of renewable energy and insight from my experience in Uganda, the opportunities and barriers or challenges to renewable energy in Uganda, and what and how regional and international support required for addressing renewable energy in Uganda, and also the meaning of renewable energy to me in Uganda. I want to start by saying that the increasing awareness of the dangers caused by climate change has made renewable energy a focus, and has also caused many countries, including Uganda, to start talking about transition to renewable energy, low carbon economy, and also replacing fossil fuel with renewable energy. Agenda 2030, declared on 25th September 2015, the SDG with 17 goals gave a boost to renewable energy, if only issues to do with governance policies on renewable energy are implemented. Especially SDG 7 depend on quantity and quality of energy, and they are very key to the development of a country, but also quality of life, whether you talk about education, health, water, sanitation, security, industrialization, and productivity. Uganda has a substantial amount of renewable energy and evenly distributed in the country. And this includes wind with a speed of 2 to 6 minutes per second, hydropower capacity of 4,100 megawatts, but only installed about 1,000 megawatts. We also have solar, the average of which is about 5.1 kilowatt hours per meter square, and also geothermal, about 450 megawatts, but not well developed. Biogas, annual yields of about 50 million tons, and also peat, although some people don't treat peat as a renewable, but others consider so, about 800 megawatts, and this is equivalent to about 250 tons of oil equivalent. And we have also the biomass, which is majorly used, about 90%, and with firewood of about 78.6%, charcoal 5.6%, crop residues of 4.7%, and cogeneration, renewable through cogeneration of about 1,650 megawatts. Now, this is already a rich area for renewable energy in Uganda. But all this potential, if well developed, can generate about 7,200 megawatts of electricity, and if developed with policies and making access low, the cost to be low. But Uganda has the smallest per capita energy consumption in sub-Saharan Africa. Much as we are talking about the global consumption of 168,515 terawatts, but only Africa has 3%. That's according to the International Energy Agency 2010. Therefore, there are opportunities we can explore in Uganda to address renewable. First, Uganda adopted the roadmap with goals and work plans to scale up renewable energy. Also, Uganda believes in increased investment in renewable energy that would improve national grid supply, boost energy security, and advance sustainable development. Therefore, with all this support of the government, I call upon the international community to increase climate financing. We are also talking about giving us good price for carbon so that with our rich biodiversity, we shall be able to address the issue of renewable. But we are also talking about debt swap because we...
Yes, please finish.
Most of the damage caused by climate change was caused by outsiders. So we are saying, can we cause a debt swap? Because that will make us to have a level ground. The high rate of deforestation is because we don't have alternatives. Therefore, these are issues that we need to address. The high interest loans, we need trade instead of loans. The dim energy, we need energy. We invest in energy, and it must reach the people, and it must be strong, reliable, and for industrial use. And also we need to invest in research and development, reliable energy infrastructure, and address replacement for renewable energy. For example, subsidies for kerosene can be used for renewable energy. These are our position, and we think if we can work together, we shall be able to scale up renewable energy in Uganda. After all, we are rich in biodiversity, and we have high potential. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Biyika Songa. I think your call was very much heard with the need for international climate financing, new finance instruments, debt swaps, and supports to be able to invest further in renewable energy to use the untapped potential in Uganda. Now I would like to hand over to Honorable Samuel Onwigbo, former Member of Parliament from Nigeria and from the Climate Change Committee from Nigeria. Honorable Onwigbo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. I would like to just say a few points based on the guidance I was given. First is to say that what we are doing in Nigeria is going to be part of the whole approach that Africa intends to adopt in tackling the challenges coming from both climate change and the issue of renewable energy. For instance, in Nigeria, with a population of about 223 million people, we know that less than 40% of that has access to electricity as a whole. And we also know that we have abundant raw materials. We have sun, we have water, and we also have wind. But we've not been able to get to that point. Let me also point out that over the years, for nearly a little over 50 years now, issue of electricity remained in the exclusive list of the Constitution. But I'm happy to announce that the 9th National Assembly, which I served in alongside one of my colleagues there, Honorable Bolus, we were able to amend the Constitution to remove electricity from where it was handled only by the federal government. We have not been able to push it down to the concurrent list, even to the point where local governments can get involved in it. So it's a major amendment. Following that, the 9th Assembly was also able to pass a revolutionary Electricity Act 2023, which was assented to by our president, who recognized in his inaugural speech that electricity will become more accessible and affordable to businesses and homes alike. Power generation should nearly double, and transmission and distribution networks improved. We will encourage states to develop local sources as well, unquote. So in line with that, in a few weeks after that, the law passed by the National Assembly, 9th National Assembly, was assented to by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, just few weeks, about 2 weeks after he assumed office. So we on a path to truly revolutionize the entire process. And I know that in one of the laws, it was made explicit in one of the sections that any law passed by the state, that is to tell you that it's been further strengthened, will not be either countered by the federal, because the states have not been given authority to be able to make laws on electricity and all that, including renewable energy. So when you look at this together, you would then find that we have taken the proper step towards meeting our electricity needs, taking into consideration the contributions from renewable energy. And that is very, very, very important. Let me also add that in the whole nation, the local governments we have is 774, and we have 36 states. So this law, in line with the Climate Change Act, which by the grace of God I sponsored, which we passed in 2021, and it was assented to. They are in line because in our Climate Change Act, we also provided for these subnationals to participate in national decision-making by the council that is chaired by Mr. President. So we have now seen that this law, Electricity Act, is also in tune, it's in line with the Climate Change Act. So we are now going to be able to take advantage of our population, available materials or raw materials, and also the fact that we have a huge market. I've seen the lights, taking a different position, so I should be moving faster than before. But let me say that Nigeria has over 60% youthful population and lack of electricity access to over 40% of its estimated population of 223 million, with abundant raw materials of adequate sun.
Again, of course, you have a minute to finish.
Thank you. Of adequate sun, wind, water, etc., is ready market for investors in renewable energy. Let me conclude by advising investors, and of course this includes Nigerians. And let me digress a bit and point out the fact that in our telecommunications privatization, it is driven by an African approach, because when we called on international telecommunications firms to participate in it, they were reluctant. But it was the local, let me call it African company, the MTN, that joined forces with us and now use that position to leapfrog. So I see that this is also going to happen with our renewable energy experience. I therefore use this opportunity to invite not only the international community, but our fellow African brothers to work on this and achieve it. Let me also thank this wonderful, great parliament for affording us this opportunity to share these ideas. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you so much, Honorable Samuel Onukbu, for your insights on recent legislation in Nigeria. I would now like to hand over to Honorable Jacqueline Mongin, Member of Parliament from Uganda and Chair of APNC. So, Honorable Jacqueline, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, our moderator and honorable members present here. Already my chair of the Committee of Climate Change of Uganda, Honorable Lawrence Nsonga, has effectively talked about Uganda, and mine would be to just add a voice on what Honorable Lawrence has talked about. I would like to also emphasize on the fact that Uganda is rich in renewable energy resources, including hydrogen power, biomass, solar energy, geothermal peat, and wind. And therefore, many renewable energy resources that can be used for energy production. Although I would state here that Uganda has not yet tapped its potential in regards to this direction. Uganda has also put in place policies that could be related to championing renewable energy in the country, including Uganda adopted in 2002 different policies that could be related, including the climate change policy of 2015, and all the other policies that have been addressed by the different, have been addressed differently in Uganda, including Uganda being part of the energy for all, and all the other instruments that have made Uganda to redirect its engagement in regards to promoting renewable energy. Of course, there are so many opportunities in Uganda. As you are aware, 26 million people are not yet served by power. And that gives Uganda a potential in terms of now promoting, instead of just powering Uganda, but powering going renewable as a country. It is among it's among the access deficit countries in Africa, and I think this gives Uganda a very good strategic ground in terms of promoting renewable energy. The Uganda Investment Authority in 2018, among the businesses published for attracting investors in the country, included viable projects within Uganda, including geothermal exploration, among others, and that definitely relates to renewable energy. I would like to borrow the example of Germany, and those are the countries that have done well in renewable energy, and I think Uganda is one of those countries that has the greatest actually potential. Like in my earlier speech when we were opening, I talked about the wind energy potential is very viable in Uganda. However, we still have challenges. The challenges that we have as a country, and that may not only be for Uganda, it could also be to other countries, is we are delving into using renewable energies like solar, among others, that have poor quality. So we need to build our own potential within Africa, within the country, to be able to assemble our own energy plants within the country so that we do not really rely on poor quality that is brought from the different parts of the world. It is also a potential for local entrepreneurship. So with those, a lot of things have already been talked to by Honorable Nsonga, but vocational training in this direction is very key, and emphasizing that entrepreneurs take this as a business would be a way forward in terms of championing renewable energy access for all Ugandans, but to me, I believe for all Africans that are not yet served with the renewable energy potential. I thank you.
Thank you very much. The light was not even red. Thank you for this and giving some more insights on legislation in Uganda. And I found it inspiring to see also see it as an opportunity for Uganda to promote renewables to combat energy access and the need to build an own renewable energy industry on the continent. Thank you very much. Now I would like to hand over to Honorable Zahar Al-Bassar, Member of Parliament from Egypt and Deputy Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. The floor is yours.
Thank you. For Egypt, Egypt gives a high priority for renewable energy opportunities due to the availability of the natural resources. For instance, Binban Solar Park in Aswan, it highlights the immense potential of solar power generating. Binban is one of the largest solar installations globally, consists of 41 solar power plants, with a total capacity of 1.65 gigawatts, providing electricity to more than 1.5 million households. Also, there is the Za'farana wind farm, which is along the Red Sea coast, illustrates our commitment to wind energy with over 600 megawatt of installed capacity. This project signifies the contribution and the importance of reducing the reliance on fossil fuel in Egypt. We also see the investment in projects for renewable energy as an opportunity for job creation. The construction and the ongoing maintenance of renewable energies like for example, the West Bakr wind farm, it employed hundreds of local workers, demonstrating the economic benefits of renewables. Moreover, in Egypt, we are actively attracting green finance. Egypt successfully secured financing for the Komombo solar plant, which provides around 200 megawatt facility located near Aswan. This kind of partnerships and this kind of work to attract green financing is also backed by government efforts and parliamentary efforts. From the government side, we had the feed-in tariff program to provide attractive incentives to renewable energy developers and private sector investments. And for parliaments, our parliament had a priority to have a policy framework for the renewable energies, and we have Egypt's renewable energy law, and with the establishment of the Egyptian Electricity Utility and Consumer Protection Regulatory Agency, we both played a vital role in providing a stable regulatory environment. And for the question of partnership regionally and internationally and how it helps us as parliamentarians, I can say that we find it very supportive in capacity building. We understand more and we learn more from our regional and international partners the regulations of electricity markets, promoting clean energy and improving the energy efficiency. Also, attending and participating in regional and international forums like, for example, IRENA, IPU, the Mediterranean Energy Regulators Forums, where we meet parliamentarians like you, honorables here. We share experiences, we share best practices. Such forums helps us learn more from each other and actually form a regional partnership and regulatory frameworks. In closing, Egypt is dedicated to go ahead with its renewable energy journey, and we welcome collaboration with international partners and harness the full potential of renewables, creating jobs, strengthen our infrastructure, and contribution to greener and sustainable future for everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Zahra Al-Bazar, for those insights on legislation also in Egypt regarding feed-in tariffs and an Egyptian renewable energy law, and for highlighting the need for international fora to exchange on capacity building, how to regulate markets, how to advance energy efficiency, and so on. Thank you very much. I would now like to announce the final speaker of this panel now, Honorable Senator Wahome Wamatinga, Member of Parliament in Kenya. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, moderator. Thank you very much, session chair. Let me take this opportunity, first of all, to congratulate us all for, first of all, taking time to sit down here and have a candid discussion of what needs to be done. Kenya enjoys 86% of renewable energy from the matrix of hydro, geothermal, solar, and biomass. However, we have a penetration rate of about 77%. This could be very deceptive because we still have not generated enough to feed our industrial development as envisaged in the Vision 2030. However, from the amount of energy that's generated, we have only about 24% being not renewable, but these cost about 70% of the amount spent on energy. I would want to maybe digress a bit and look at the PPAs, which are the major providers of energy, and look at the financing models. And I want to borrow heavily from what the speaker said. We know that most of these PPAs are financed by money borrowed from the World Bank, from other institutions, international institutions. These are pension funds from developed countries. I would want to challenge ourselves as African legislatures. It is time that we remodel our pension funds. It is time that we look at our financing models so that we do not use our investments to grow foreign pensions, but we should do that to grow African pensions. I want to take an example of this country. It takes a whole 13 years for you to get a license to produce power. This is very unattractive for any pension fund that would want to invest in that sector. And therefore, my challenge to all the legislators in this House, let us relook at the laws governing some of these models so that we can use that opportunity to ensure that it is the African pensioners who benefit as opposed to the current currently constituted PPAs where most of the monies are borrowed from pensions in the Western countries. My fellow legislators, we did indeed in Kenya pass a climate change amendment bill in a record 3 days in the Senate. I would want to believe we can do more for us Africans. I would also want to see us discussing more about technology exchange within African institutions, building the capacity so that we stop the over-reliance of this mentality that the Western must do it. Yes, true, the polluters must pay. But as we do that, we must also look at the practices that we can introduce in our countries so that how do you call it? So that the way we manage our power, the usage of power, it is done in an environmental sustainable manner. It is the responsibility of we as parliamentarians to educate, to conduct civic education, because there is a lot that we can do. We've learned in the last couple of decades, climate change has mostly affected African countries. It is the high time that now we look at laws that will govern us as a continent without having to over-rely on the Western dominance in moving this continent ahead. My fellow legislators, my challenge to us all, it is time that we came up with discussion about the cooperation within African nations, how we can do to develop regional power blocks within Africa, which we must not trade using dollars, which we can exchange, we can do better trade, so that the over-reliance on dollar does not kill our economy. This is a factor that we must look at. We must put legal measures in place. We must implement frameworks that will help us to harvest and to advance our own resources, using our own knowledge, developing our own knowledge base, and most importantly, knowing that we know where the problem is, and we are the ones who must come up with solutions. As parliamentarians, I would want to challenge ourselves. Let us start looking at this as the new down, where Africa must stand up for herself and say, indeed, the solution of the problems we have in climate change, we must be pioneers. As much as I would want to say, it is important that also the polluters must be brought on the floor so that we can offset the pollution that they cause with the carbon credits. And this must be put in a framework that will benefit the Africans and the people of Africa, but the champions must be the legislatures in African continent, because the change must begin with us, and we must be the champions of that change. Chair, I submit.
Thank you very much, Honorable Wahome Wamatinga, for this very strong call for further exchange, cooperation among African nations, and a truly African-led agenda. We are a bit behind time due to the session before, but our Honorable Chair gave us until 11:50 for a bit more of discussion now. So I would like to open the floor for, let's say, 3 questions, and I would like to limit those questions to 2 minutes so that we can hear really 3 more people and give the panel a chance to react briefly to that. So I would like now the audience to raise your hand if you have questions, and please excuse if I can only take 3 questions. The first one I saw was here with the white, no, here in the second row. Yes, you can please stand up and introduce yourself, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, moderator. Good morning, Honorable Senator and Member of Parliament. My name is Cyril Siwe. I'm the head of UNEP for Kenya. I am very flattered to be part of these conversations, and he has been extremely educating to listen to the Member of Parliament. Yes, you're fully right, Honorable, to say that capacity building is very important, that we have to train, and not only academic training, but practical training. So me, from where I stand at United Nations Environment Program with other colleagues from what we call the United Nations country team in Kenya, one of the questions that could come that I would also like to invite for the deliberation is, at what cost? Let's take the example of renewable energy and green transition, since this conversation and part of this conference agenda is on green transition. The cost of electric car, which is something that will probably be debated in this August room, is it something that is sustainable for average Kenyans or East Africans? If you take the medium-sized car, which is currently being produced in Rwanda, the car goes for 70,000 USD. And if you take the average profession, which is a teacher or a medical doctor, how long it would need to put aside to be able to buy this car and be part of the energy transition? What I mean here, moderator, is how can this opportunity be also a platform to have that type of conversation and to agree as a continent and to agree as an actor, as those who set the framework, what type of enabling, what type of incentives can we put forward? This conversation, we understand the pro and the cons, and therefore we create enabling environment for industry and for private sector to be part of that conversation. Thank you. I stop here.
Thank you very much for highlighting the need for enabling environment and making those technologies really affordable for people on the ground. I saw back there a gentleman having a further question. Yes, please introduce yourself. You also have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coordinator. My name is Dr. Emmanuel Otala, a Member of Parliament from Uganda and the Chairperson of the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. I am not asking a question, but I want to, first of all, subscribe to the submission of my honorable colleagues from Uganda, the Honorable Lawrence Songa and the Honorable Jacqueline Amongi. But I want to raise a very fundamental issue that in Uganda, for the past 20 years, we have invested close to 20 billion US dollars in oil and gas development. And I'm happy that the conversation that we are having right now is in respect to a transition to clean energy sources. And I want to observe that the developed countries that contribute much of the carbon causing the rise in climate and overall climate changes are still continuing to invest in fossil fuel development. For the past 20 years, the developed countries have made it difficult for Uganda to develop its oil and gas. And what I'm saying is that with our investment, and in view of the fact that a transition is going to take some little bit of time, I am raising a controversial issue that Uganda will continue to develop its oil and gas in view of that, unless the main polluters compensate us and tell us that yes, now with the investment that, I'm sorry, can I just finalize on that?
Yeah, just briefly conclude, please.
Thank you. If we can be given a reparation for our investments so far, because they are the ones who have made it difficult for us to get our oil out of the ground, I must say that we must strike a balance between transition and developing oil and gas. Thank you. I submit.
Thank you very much for your point on investments still going in oil and gas and this argument of needing, of striking this balance. I saw one gentleman over here. You have the floor for 2 minutes and then we give the panel the possibility to react.
Thank you very much, Sessions Chair, and thank you very much, our Super Senator, Otieno Kajwang, for this opportunity to ask a very pertinent question. Now that we have those who pollute the environment and those who clean the environment, the West being the pollutants and the African being the lungs that clean the environment. And yesterday, our president talked about introduction of taxes, because when we depend on donation to be able to mitigate the issue of environmental pollution, then we may not go far. Where can we come in as legislative arms, either the Pan-African Parliament or East African Legislative Assembly, or even local assemblies, to be able to set laws that will enable those who pollute the environment to pay taxes for pollution, and then those taxes be used to compensate the lungs of the environment. Lastly, I want to ask another question on the issue of persons with disability and climate change. In Africa, we have approximately 100 million persons with disabilities. Crutches, wheelchairs, and other assisted devices are manufactured in factories. How can we be able to urge them, those factories, to use renewable energy? If I may just give an example, in Kenya we have 400,000 wheelchair users. Those are Kenyans sitting on a metallic worth 12 billion factory. So how can we come in to be able to use renewable energy in the manufacture of assisted devices for persons with disability? Let us not leave anybody behind. Also, persons with disability should be involved in this climate change summit. Thank you.
Thank you very much for raising those points on the need of new taxes, and also to leave no one behind, and see how also people with disabilities can be taken on board of this transition. I would now just give the panel the chance for very brief reaction, maybe 1 minute per person. Maybe you can focus on one of those issues raised in your intervention. And I would like to start with Honorable Onwigbo, since he's there in line, and then go one by one of the speakers.
Thank you very much indeed. I listened to what Dr. Otela said when he was talking about the cost, about $70,000 US to acquire a vehicle or so. All I would like to say is to encourage us as a people, as a continent, because we know the disadvantages we have faced over time. For instance, I mentioned the successful partnership or collaboration between a company from South Africa, when nobody wanted to, deal with us, when we were privatizing the telecommunications industry in Nigeria. It was an African company that came, and then it turned out to be a gold mine. So we can work together. The cost of telephone, 3310, they call it, was 30-something thousand, 52,000. But over time, with increased number of people purchasing, improved technology, the price just dropped. I have no doubt that that's where we're going to go as we are talking about renewable energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Honorable Ben.
Yes, very brief. The problem is, when we are investing in photovoltaic, we have to spend at the beginning a lot of money, and in the operating time, it's cheaper. But how can we get this money at the beginning? That is a problem. So, for example, we are looking for, from the GIZ, for funds that you can replace diesel by photovoltaic, and then you have at the end a benefit of it. As I said, financing systems, we are talking about result-based financing systems, because on the one side you have the big investments, on-grid investments, that something like PPAs, and you have to to make a good contract, but we are talking about decentralized solutions, and that's the problem of maintenance. And so we would like to strengthen local market, because the big investments, they are made from foreign companies and not from the local market. So that's why we are talking about grants, we are talking about private money, and we are talking about a business case for local companies. And that's the system of result-based financing.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I thank you so much, honorable members. I still insist that the solutions must come from ourselves if we have to champion this renewable energy. And we must be the ones to know what exactly is right and copying from what those other successful countries have done. Otherwise, it is still a gap that has to be covered, and we are the people that will cover that gap. And Honorable Sankok, my colleague, raised an issue in regards to the disability. Article 21 in our constitution in Uganda talks about right, each and everyone enjoying the rights. And all our legislations, disability is mainstreamed in all acts, all bills that are adopted by Parliament and assented to by the President of Uganda. And I think this is not any different. And of course, this is a call for all of us, whenever we are championing any cause, not to leave issues of disability. Inclusion is very necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to put this very clear, that sustainable management of the environment or climate is not about don't touch. Touch it so long as the benefits are more than the cost. So we have to do a lot of cost-benefit analysis, because if we say people are using firewood and charcoal, don't touch, what will they use? There is no way someone who is using firewood will jump to start using electricity. So we have to do a lot of cost-benefit analysis in our decision. Then number two, there was a mention that 2% of the renewable energy fund from the global community is reaching Africa. Do you know why? Because we have an agency that is doing the credit rating based in South Africa and doing credit rating for the whole 54 countries of Africa. And so in Africa, the countries that are scoring high is only Mauritius, Botswana, and so other countries cannot get that credit from that loan from the private sector, who are told that we are still scoring below capacity. Otherwise, for us, we still recommend that we do the energy mix in Uganda, and we move towards net zero. And there is still time frame up till 2050 or 2030 that we can do that. So what is the problem with generating 100% tons of greenhouse gases and absorbing it all in the sink? Thank you.
Thank you. So the final speaker in this round would be Honorable Zahra Al-Bazar from Egypt.
Thank you, and I would like to thank this opportunity for exchanging and learning from each other as parliamentarians. I stress very hard on platforms where we can share best practices, best regulations, learn from each other, and have an inclusive policy framework, platforms and opportunities where we can help each other to learn. The other thing is I also would like to emphasize the role of young people in our local communities. And as young parliamentarian, I also call for other parliamentarians to empower young people to participate and raise their awareness about the importance of renewable energies and how it's beneficial for our economies and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have come to the end of this session. So, honorable members of parliament, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, it was an honor to moderate this session. I think we learned a lot about opportunities, legislation, obstacles of renewable energy there. We have just heard one call to emphasize the role of young people. I would like to take that and put it a bit further, and as part of global civil society, emphasize the role of civil society also. And it would be a pleasure to continue to work with you to strengthen also the bonds of parliamentarians and civil society in general. And with that, I am now closing the session and hand over to our honorable chair for further remarks on the continuation of this conference. Thank you very much. And maybe a big applause also to our panel. Sorry, I forgot about that.
One very burning question. One very burning question.
Where is it coming from?
Can I?
Senator, it must be very burning. Senator Kavindu, maybe a minute. Let it be a question, not a speech.
I'll try.
Please. And it is a very dangerous window. It's a very dangerous window that I'm opening.
Yeah, thank you. My question is, we Africans are put in a place where we are meant to be very poor. But I want to say, Africans, we are not poor, because the best diamonds come from here. God comes from here. Every good gemstone comes from here. And I'm talking of gemstones knowing what I'm talking about. Africa, if these gemstones and every wealth that we have in Africa is controlled, there is nothing we cannot do. What are we meant to do as parliamentarians to capture and to control our wealth so that we can be able to get the money, the finances that we need, because it is here in Africa, so that we can move forward with these climate and energy problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Honorable members, we still have 2 plenary sessions, and we have a tea break. And I want to just propose that we do just a 15-minute tea break. And clerk, I don't know whether we're allowed to ring the bell after the 15 minutes. And then when we come to the next session, that will be moderated by our friend from Konrad Adenauer, during the plenary we can take more questions. So, Mheshimiwa Simba, I've seen you've raised your hand. We can take that at the next session. And all those who were not able to, yes, Solomon from Nigeria, we can fill those questions in the next plenary session. So we take a 15-minute break. Tea will be served as you walk out of the chamber. Is it on the left or on the right? It's on the right. We just make it quick, 15 minutes, and then we can come back and take the other questions that are still pending. Thank you. Your commitment and the enthusiasm that you exhibited during our session on Monday. We had a session on Monday. It was a side event at the Africa Climate Summit. that was officially opened by the Speaker of the Senate, the Right Honorable Amason Kingi. I trust that we'll be able to maintain our stamina and enthusiasm despite the lengthy and busy day. Today, we hope to extract and refine our strategies for effective parliamentary oversight in identification of gaps that require attention to achieve sustained and impactful climate action throughout the African continent. For those who were present yesterday during the presidential addresses at the Africa Climate Summit, a lot was said, and some of which will come back to the respective national parliaments. If it is a new tax regime, it must get the approval of parliament. If it's a new policy regime, it needs to come to parliament in the form of sessional papers. Indeed, even the conventions that we subscribe to and that have led us to convene in Nairobi today, be it the UNFCCC, the Kyoto Protocol, and the Paris Agreement, have all been ratified by respective parliaments. Mr. Speaker, sir, we thank you for agreeing to host us in this beautiful chamber. This chamber is older than the Paris Agreement, it's older than the Kyoto Protocol, it's older than the UNFCCC, but we believe that the crisis of climate change is older than this chamber. Mr. Speaker, to kick off our session, you'll allow me just to reorganize the program a little bit. Initially, the opening remarks were to be made by the substantive chairs of the Climate Change and Environmental Committees of the National Assembly and the Senate, but because some of our guests have got presidential appointments and are pressed for time, Mr. Speaker, you'll indulge me, and you'll allow me to first call Dr. Kande Yumkela. Dr. Kande Yumkela is a very familiar face in the climate space. We last saw him in Luxor, and I think Sharm el-Sheikh under the auspices of Climate Parliament. But he's an old hand in diplomacy. Dr. Kande Yumkela chairs the Presidential Initiative on Climate Change, Renewable Energy, and Food Security in Sierra Leone. Dr. Yumkela, you may make your presentation in 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, distinguished members of Parliament, colleagues. It's an honor for me to be here in this august house. It is particularly a great honor to speak here at a time that the great speaker is sitting in his seat, a man with whom we have fought many battles on trade and industrialization and energy access when I was Director General of UNIDO. Thank you for the leadership of Kenya at that time when Africa needed a voice. He and your leadership in this country and other heads of states and governments backed the African position on many critical issues in the United Nations. I'm very pleased to be here with distinguished colleagues from the Climate Parliament, also Babel particularly sitting next to me, a more seasoned hand in legislation, but also in the executive branch. I was an MP myself up to April this year, but now I have crossed the line. I'm on the executive side now. The president said I was debating too much in Parliament, that I should come over now and do stuff. So instead of giving me just renewable energy, he gave me climate change, renewable energy, and food security all combined to ensure coordination amongst ministers, but also to create that link with Parliament. Whatever we do, it is obvious to you, we must come back to this chamber. We're very pleased with the ambition Kenya has provided for us now on the climate front, but there is a lot we can learn from you. We were very inspired to see that, in fact, Kenya at 92% renewables in their energy mix can speak truth to Germany, to the United States, to China. Why? Because Africa is doing what they have not done. They've caused the climate problem, but in fact, Africans are leading the transformation. Kenya is demonstrating something Babel has always believed, that you can have 100% renewables in your energy mix. So congratulations, Kenya. My president is very clear in his mind, given what he has seen. We're very happy he came to this summit. It makes my work relatively easy. He's already told me that we have to do what Kenya has done in terms of legislation, first policy, strategy, but also legislation. He's been able to see the whole suite of what you need to do: policy, legislation, regulations, and of course backed by acts of parliament. More importantly, he's, together with President Ruto, launched a number of initiatives here We were very pleased to see the FLOCA, again, pioneering demonstration of Kenya taking climate action from national to the lowest ward in the country. Pioneering initiative. Second, together with IRENA, we've been able to launch the accelerated partnership for the development of renewables in Africa. We want to thank IRENA for their leadership. I've also, together with Babel, facilitated the legislative forums at the International Renewable Energy Agency. So, Honorable Speaker, what I will say is this is not my last visit, because we need to do those legislations. And what my president and I have emphasized, why are we partnering with Kenya? We'll be able to do some of what you've done quicker because you've already gone through the processes. But I see my sister here from Uganda. In the Climate Parliament, I've heard what they've done in Uganda as well. So what we're trying to say to the international community is if our African countries are beginning to lead in some areas, help us learn from them so that we can move quicker together. Finally, Mr. Speaker, Africa sits on endowments, and that's the key message your president has delivered for us, which we've imbibed. We don't want to take climate change as victims. We're looking at the new opportunity message. As your climate envoy, Ali Mohammed, said to me, we're looking at climate positive growth. We have the green assets that will absorb the carbon. In fact, the largest in the world. We also have the largest available arable land to feed the 9 billion people that we'll have probably by 2050. But we have the critical minerals, 40% of them that everybody else needs to get that green economy moving. We don't want to be treated like 17th century mercantilism, people coming in just to get the minerals. We want to move into green industrialization. So the message from Kenya we're taking home, my president is taking it, it's not from a victim standpoint, it's an opportunity. We believe we can lead. We have the green assets in terms of our ecologies to absorb the carbon. Can that be valued properly? We learned here that in Europe, carbon is $100 a ton. In Kenya, people are valuing it at $7. But is it not the same carbon? Why should the other one be valued more than we who avoid the emissions but absorb for you? So these are things, again, we need leadership from Africa to say, for climate justice, we suffer already, but we will absorb what you have created, and we have the biggest lungs of the world in our Congo Basin and the rest of us who have the forests. And more importantly, we have the minerals you need. How do we value these so that we get the investments we need to do what Babel wants, that transition to renewables? But we have to use all our energy resources. So it's an honor for me. We're here to learn from others, and indeed there's a lot to learn from you. And we will be with you on that journey so that we can say to the Germans, Africa has the first country that is 100% renewables. Thank you.
Thank you, Yumkela Kande. And Yumkela Kande was the Director General of UNIDO. He headed UN Energy, and he was also responsible and part of the team that wrote SDGs 7 and 9 on energy and industrialization. A few announcements that I should have made at the beginning is that the program is entirely digital. So it is on the iPads before you. There are no passwords on those iPads. We've got Wi-Fi. The password to the Wi-Fi is also on the iPads before you. For the washrooms, if you walk out of this chamber, on your immediate left, you'll find the restrooms there. Because one of our guests is heading into another meeting, allow me now to introduce the Chief Executive Officer on the Global Center on Adaptation and Distinguished Chair of the Wangari Maathai Institute for Peace and Environmental Studies, a gentleman whose organization received special attention yesterday in President Ruto's address, when President Ruto announced that the GCA, or Global Center on Adaptation, would establish its African headquarters in Nairobi. Professor Dr. Patrick Vakojeng, please, the floor is yours.
Honorable Speaker of the House, members of Parliament, I have one message for you. Adapt or die. Of course, the whole global community is in a climate emergency, but Africa is ground zero. And what we now experience with the war in Ukraine, with the cost of living crisis, a food crisis, an energy crisis, climate adaptation is the poor cousin of the climate debate. In fact, particularly people from the north tell Africans there is no money left for climate adaptation to support African nations. Well, tell that to a mother in Makweni who has to walk 4 hours a day to fetch water because the rains are not coming, and as a consequence takes her 3 children out of school. Tell that to a pregnant woman in Accra, Ghana, who cannot reach the hospital because of the floods. Tell that to a young entrepreneur in Senegal who had this great idea about drip irrigation technology, who cannot get a loan because he hasn't got credit. Africa needs a revolution on adaptation. Yet, adapt or die. There is good news though. Over the last 12 months, under the leadership of President Ruto, the largest adaptation program, not just for Africa, but for the world, has been launched, the African Adaptation Acceleration Program. What is it? $25 billion over 5 years. Already in the first year, $6 billion has been dispersed. Is it enough? Absolutely not. How much is needed per year for Africa as a whole? $51 billion. How much is flowing today? $11 billion. So there's a massive gap which still it needs to be filled on climate adaptation because, as you know, members of parliament, climate adaptation is about development, is about people, is about the people who you represent. You as members of parliament have an extraordinarily important role to play in this adaptation revolution. You oversee government, you approve budget, you set the laws and policies, precisely the laws and policies which the world needs, which Africa needs, which the people of Africa need. Secondly, as our moderator introduced, the Global Center on Adaptation is here with you. I'm from, full disclosure, I'm from the Netherlands in Europe, and 3 months ago I had the honor of welcoming President Ruto to the Netherlands, to our headquarters in Europe. We have the largest floating office in the world, and President Ruto said, well, actually, I'm not a good swimmer. In fact, I cannot even swim, and we don't even have water in Nairobi, but we want to have such an office in Nairobi which epitomizes the climate adaptation agenda. So that is why we were very honored that yesterday President Ruto announced the largest nature-based office of the Global Center on Adaptation, which will be built here in the coming year. Secondly, we know that you have a caucus of climate parliamentarians. There is a very difficult acronym which I was told to share with you, which I'm sure you know, APNCA, and that today you also announce a specific working group on climate adaptation. That is critically important. We're ready to support. We're here on a journey. The world 2 years ago, well, today we're at the summit. Kande is leaving, has already left. We're all running to summits. We come to summits. But 2 years ago, let us not forget, the international community promised to double international finance for climate adaptation. It has not yet delivered. And we need you, your voices, to make that happen. Let me close. In the run-up to this summit, Honorable Speaker of the House, I had the honor to visit Kenya, not once, not twice, 7 times since the beginning of this year. And I had the honor to meet Anne Ikinye in Makweni. Anne, a mother of 5, she showed me what is possible in the field. She said, well, here, yes, we have the largest drought in 40 years, but I have drought-tolerant seeds. I've seen that under the AAAP, the African Adaptation Acceleration Program, certain interventions are done. Her kids are back to school. She's managed to produce her fruit. She's selling to local markets. So adaptation in action is possible, but it needs to scale up. It needs to speed up. What I learned when I was there in Makueni, and when I was humbled to meet with Anne, that Anne Akinie, that Akinie means in Luo, she told me, born in the morning. I'm absolutely convinced that the adaptation revolution is also born in the morning here in Nairobi during this summit, and we really are keen to work with all of you to make this revolution happen, because if Africa invests in adaptation, if you as parliamentarians make this your top priority, not only Africa is unstoppable, but the people of Africa who you represent are unstoppable. Thank you very much indeed. God bless Kenya.
Thank you, Professor. We all look forward to the hosting of the Africa headquarters of GCA in Nairobi, and I do believe that in your meeting with President Ruto, the timelines will be clear. Honorable members, Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to introduce the Deputy Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency. She's called Gauri Singh. Gauri Singh is an economist who has had extensive experience working in India and globally. Ms. Gauri Singh. Ms. Gauri Singh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, moderator, and Excellency Speaker of the National Assembly of Kenya, honorable parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you on behalf of the International Renewable Energy Agency to provide us this opportunity to interact with all of you today. IRENA has been very engaged with the ministries of energy in nearly all the countries in Africa, right from our inception. And we have been playing a role in supporting the governments to take forward policies and regulations, and by giving them the analytics to support more renewables into the energy mix. And we really think, and going by what we heard from President Ruto yesterday, which was a very inspiring address, that this is an important time for Africa, and the past few days being at the Africa Climate Summit have really shown us the huge energy that's very predominantly comes through when you hear the interactions and the discussions that are happening at the summit. I don't think I need to tell the honorable members of parliament on the effects of climate change that are continuing to disrupt our lives in ways that were previously quite unimaginable, and they are leaving behind a great social and economic toll in their wake. In a few places, we are seeing the impact really come through as drought, as Professor pointed out, and we know from the reports that a large part of Africa was facing very, very severe droughts very recently. We are also seeing increase in temperatures, sea levels, and changing precipitation patterns, and extreme weather events that are now threatening both the human health and safety, food and water security, and also the socio-economic development of Africa. So while on the one hand, we definitely see the possibility of the African economy, which is projected to grow in the coming years, but on the other hand, we heard this yesterday, that we have to also take into account that any growth in GDP can very easily get nullified by the impact of climate change and the kind of impact that it can have on the economic growth. So with Africa, which is blessed with vast renewable energy resources, and if they are well harnessed, many countries can completely transform their energy systems, move away from the kind of dependency on imported fossil fuel, and to use the indigenous sources of renewable energy, which are now the cheapest source of power globally. In the recent years, what we've seen is that renewables has become not just the most cost-effective way of producing power, but what we've also seen is that globally, almost 83% of the new additions in the power mix globally are coming from renewables. So it's become pretty much the dominant way of powering our energy systems, and that's what's leading the energy transition as we're moving along. If we look at Africa, and I take you to the context of last year, so globally we saw an addition of 300,000 megawatts of new renewable energy that were added globally. But if I look at the share of Africa in this, it's about 6,000 gigawatts, so 6,000 megawatts. So you can imagine that there's much more that can be done in terms of where the countries in Africa can achieve given their very rich resources of renewable sources that are available in the countries. Also, our analytics at IRENA have shown us that less than 2% of the global investment that went into renewable energy flowed into Africa, which means that very small amounts of investment coming to Africa, which is definitely an area of concern, and it needs to be addressed because this is a continent that needs to play its part in the global transition, energy transition that's happening. One aspect that I also want to talk about is that IRENA in its latest World Energy Transition Outlook has highlighted that if we have to keep on the 1.5 degree pathway that we've, as a global community, agreed at Paris, then the renewable energy share and the deployment annually has to triple. So that's a big ask if you look at tripling from 300 to about 1,000 gigawatts every year, but it's not something that cannot be achieved. And we have shown through analytics that it's something that countries, when they come together, they have also looking at the historical trends, it's definitely a possibility. So in terms of, in terms of how the world is moving forward, we've seen that with the Ukraine crisis, energy security has become a very important part of the whole energy transition narrative. Energy security was not earlier so dominant, but now we're seeing that it's become a very dominant aspect of how countries want to secure their future. And renewable energy can play a very important role in this. So as members of parliament, you will definitely be playing a very key role in shaping the course of your countries. And in Kenya, as you've seen, that it's a very major role that has been played by the parliamentarians in getting the right legislations forward, which will start showing results in terms of attracting financing from the global community. Africa can build a strategic response that can put the local and the regional economies at the forefront and can be a front runner in showing the world how sustainable growth and development can happen. We've heard from President Ruto yesterday about how he, along with the other heads of states of countries in Africa, are shaping the narrative around climate change, and as we move forward for the COP28 in Dubai, and I hope that from IRENA we can be a small contributor to supporting you in your interactions as we move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gauri Singh. Energy poverty is a matter that came up in speeches of leaders yesterday. Africa producing 56 gigawatts to be shared between 55 countries. And so the ambition to increase Africa's productivity to 200 gigawatts by 2030 is a resolution that we highly welcome. The next speaker is a politician. She's a green politician and she's wearing green. Honorable Babel Horn is a chair of the Global Renewables Congress. She's a former member of parliament of the German Bundestag. She has been a minister She's the current Commissioner for Energy Reform in Africa, and the only person who can beat her political record is the Honorable Speaker sitting behind me. Honorable Babel Horn, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And first, honorable colleagues, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the Speaker of the House because he invited us here. And this place, that's a very important one, because you are here, the parliamentarians, you are debating and you are deciding about the political framework and about the laws. And that's why you have a very, very important role, because parliamentarians are the bridge between the national level and the local level. And if we are not convincing the local level and install renewables on the local level, we will not be successful. So that's why you must bring your knowledge. What's about obstacles? What's about blockades on the local level? Bring this knowledge to the parliament, and then you can change the laws to be more successful in installing renewables. As I was told of, so I was a politician for more than 30 years, and I started as a town councillor. So that was very important for me, because I'm very close to the people. At the end, we must look and work for a better life for our population, for the people on the ground, you know. And after that, I went to the state level and was there 10 years minister and chair of the Green Parliamentarian Group, and at the end, 12 years in the national parliament. So I have experience from all levels, and that is not so bad, I would say. And 5 years ago, with some friends, we decided to start with the Global Renewable Forum, Global Renewable Congress, because we would like to support parliamentarians who have the goal of 100% renewables. And that's why I am working very close with Kende and other parliamentarians, because we would like to decide what can we do better, you know? So make practical work, make our homework, you know, and look for better situation. And when we have a look at the last years, we had some very important crises. We have not only the climate crisis, that's one, and we know about that, and the extreme weather and all the impacts, especially here in Africa. But we have other crises, and that was a COVID-19 pandemic and the Russian war in Ukraine. And both made clear that we have a problem with supply chains that disrupted, and we have a problem with increasing prices of energy and increasing prices of food. And in this time, more and more countries decided that's not so good to be so dependent on imports of fossil fuels, because it costs a lot. You must pay for it. So, and it's better to have this money inside your country, because sun and wind you have in every country. Sun and wind don't pay a bill, you know, don't give you a bill, you know. So you must use your sun and your wind a bit better to be more independent from fossil fuels and increasing prices. And that is the idea of the last years. And more states decided to invest in renewable energies because of that. And you have really a wonderful situation, and Kenny told about that, because you have such a lot of sun. We are doing that in Germany, but our sun is not that much like you have here in Germany, in Africa. So you have really a better chance. And that's what we see in the world. I studied mathematics and economy, and we have something like exponential functions. And that means they are going like this a long time, and then they are starting. And I think we are now at that starting point for renewables, to invest in renewables. And to me, I remember a picture, or two pictures, from the 5th Avenue in New York, Easter Monday. The first picture is from 1900. And you can see 100 horses-drawn carriages, and only one car. And 15 years later, 13 years later, in 913, the same place, the same Easter Monday, the same date, 13 years later, you could see 100 cars and only one horse-drawn carriages. So in 13 years, it changed. And that's where we are starting here now. We must make the change now. And I think we can do it. And that's why we decided to support you with our network of parliamentarians, because it's very important to make an exchange of ideas. What is going wrong in one country? What is going in the right direction? What can we learn from each other, And it's very important to work together in the parliament, if it's possible, with parliamentarians from other parties. As I was told, I'm from the Green Party, but now I'm working, or some years ago, the Minister of Economic Cooperation and Development from the Conservative Party asked me to be a special representative for energy in Africa from the Conservative Party, as a Green. And now the minister is from the Social Democrat Party. And I'm working together with them because we have a group of parliamentarians and politicians in Germany. They are all going ahead to support renewables. And that is very, very important, to work together cross-party, I would say. Yeah, that's why we are here, and that's why I'm very interested in the panels, because then we can talk about the details. And from my experience, in the last 7 years as special representative of energy in Africa. So I am a bit the same like Kendi, sometimes parliamentarian, sometimes in a part of government. So I can tell something about what we can do. So that is very important. Do the homework, make the exchange of ideas, and thank you for inviting us here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Babel Horn. The civil society has been a key player in the climate conversation. The Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance has, in the past, mobilized and organized members of parliament, the latest being a parliamentarians dialogue at Safari Park in Nairobi, and earlier on at Midrand in South Africa, an event that was opened by President William Ruto. The Executive Director of Pan-Africa Climate Justice Alliance, Mithika Mwenda, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, the Speaker of the Kenya National Assembly, Moses Wetangula, honorable members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. I'm also privileged and honored to be here for this conversation on parliamentarians and their role they can play in this important summit and global dialogue on climate crisis. This parliament, where we are today, is a pace setter. In 2016, it adopted and passed one of the most revolutionary pioneer climate change law, which has gone to impact not only at African level, but globally, one of the rarest comprehensive climate laws in the world. And I can tell you we work with parliamentarians, and this did not come out of the executive. This was a rare effort, collaboration between members of parliament and the civil society. And that's how transformative the role of parliamentarians in initiating transformative changes which can impact and bring changes and models which we are looking for in the climate-constrained world. This law now, as we speak now, is what we are trying to replicate across the African countries with Pan-African Parliament. And so I want really to applaud the Parliament of Kenya for this very innovative law. And we believe that we are going to work together with these members of Parliament, because perhaps the solutions we have looked for more than 30 years really to address climate change, perhaps there is a sector which has not been really utilized and involved in this discourse, and those are the members of Parliament. In May this year, we were in Midland, working with the Pan-African Parliament, bringing together parliamentarians across Africa under the auspices of Pan-African Parliamentarians Summit on Climate Policy and Equity, which was presided over by His Excellency President William Ruto, who has been a member of this parliament when that law was there, and also who is the chair of Committee of Heads of States and Governments on Climate Change of the African Union. And what we are seeing here is the national mobilization. And sitting here in this assembly today is really a testament by the government of Kenya, the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature, that we have decided that climate change is a priority. And now we are saying it is not on Kenya alone. I think we have a lot to share with our counterparts in other countries, and we need to walk the talk. For 30 years, the discourse on climate change has been top-down. It has been, you know, the contestation between the North and the South. Who should do what, who should not do what, the blame game. I think the parliamentarians have an opportunity to change that narrative. And we want allies. We have been alone, perhaps in Africa, and at global level, the parliamentarians from the former parliamentarians from the EU can tell you that there is very vibrant parliamentarians movement across the world. We do not have that in Africa. I think together with what we have done, for the past few days, we were at Safari Park really trying to internalize how to implement the declaration in South Africa. The day before yesterday, we were at KICC trying to do the same. I believe that that declaration, which is going to be delivered perhaps by Honorable Kadhambi at the plenary of the closing summit, will be an historical moment for parliamentarians in Africa now to have a seat at the discussions, and the beginning will be there. And I believe moving forward, not only to COP28, but even further, that parliamentarians in Africa will find a voice to sit together with other stakeholders as implementers of these critical decisions. Climate change, just as I conclude, is an existential threat to all of us. Parliamentarians play a very important role. When policies are passed at international level, climate change convention, the Paris Agreement, it ends there, and I know the Paris Agreement ended there. It can't be implemented in Kenya without passing through this parliament. And so
the water which is underground is your savings, is for when we had a 5-year drought here in Kenya. That's when you need to spend it. So we try to scientifically assess this and then give you that information so that this water stays not only for you and your needs, but for your kids and your grandkids. It's not only the now, we have to think about the future generations. It's not our planet, it's theirs, right? And then we look at other issues and we try to integrate this information. We have droughts followed by floods. How do you now start identifying these patterns, new patterns, and benefit from that? Instead of having too much water coming to a village creating a flood, you could stop it, create reservoirs, right, and use that for your agropastoral activities, or put it in the ground for future irrigation purposes. So again, this needs scientific tools and methods. And this is where we come in, and we're trying to educate people about water security for food security. Another example is about water quality. We use remote sensing technology, satellite information, let's say, to give you this information at your desk. So you don't have to spend too much money doing your analysis in the labs, etc. Or the same thing goes for your groundwater. So there are different elements of water security as far as the quantity concerns, the quality concerns, right? And, oops, I'm sorry, 1 minute. So the location concerns. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to give you scientific evidence so you know how much you have, how you can use it, and for how long. And then the decision is yours, it's not ours, right? We just want to give you the facts so that you can base your decisions based on the facts, thinking about the future generations, not about you only. And this is how we see food security through the lenses of water security. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandros, also for underlining the importance of science. And we all know that, for example, when it comes to the IPCC report, Africa is heavily, heavily underrepresented for data. So I think everyone here is aware that we need better data to make better decisions, as you said, not only for today, but also for the future. And I especially welcome your comment on that you are trying to provide the data, but then, you know, what happens with that, the decision is ultimately the ownership of the community. I'm sure my next speaker would underline the importance of science and data. It's Dr. Robert Kiburi from the University of Nairobi. He's a researcher on food security and climate smart agriculture. And I would like to know from your extensive research on the topic, but probably also from a policy point, yeah? How can we achieve a better and more nutritious food supply in Africa? From a policy perspective, what are your suggestions to all the policymakers who are here and listening to you?
Well, thank you very much, Anya, and thank you very much, Honorable Kajwang, and everyone present. As a Kenyan, it's obviously a pleasure to speak from the chamber. Most of the time you come to the gallery, so of course it's really good. I come from the University of Nairobi, the Faculty of Law. Yes, indeed, there are significant questions when it comes to nutritious and adequate supply of food. And from a policy perspective, first of all, is that policy often responds to diagnostic from science or from society on what is needed. And secondly, that policy then needs to be coherent. A major pitfall is when we make a policy to address one problem, but it's not holistic, and it ends up causing deleterious effects on another area. And I'd like to demonstrate using 3 examples. From the supply side of food, you know, for instance, at farm level and production side, from the production side of food, in recent years and in this week specifically, we're very concerned about climate impacts on agriculture. But I would argue that there are 2 senses. There is vulnerability in agriculture within the African continent, but this vulnerability appears in 2 senses, such that there is vulnerability inside of vulnerability. There are inherent vulnerabilities that producers, farmers face in agriculture, and these vulnerabilities make them even more susceptible to climate impacts, so that they are vulnerable 2 times over. And I can give examples. One, of course, for instance, is historically we have encouraged farmers to use certain types of fertilizers like DAP that have resulted in soil acidification, which means that their soil is less fertile and more susceptible to climate impacts. We have encouraged forms of land management and husbandry that have resulted in loss of soil organic matter, which means that we have to use more fertilizers today. We continue to encourage, to encounter high levels of post-harvest losses. And this is clear now as we head to the El Nino rainfall that is coming right at the time when farmers are expecting a bumper harvest. So my point is, this is the point I'm making about coherent policies. We need to address these vulnerabilities and deficiencies that are inherent to agriculture policies that will then make us more capable and more resilient to the climate impacts, the droughts, changing rainfall patterns that we can't really do much about. The drought will continue coming. The dry days inside the March, April, May rainfall season will continue increasing. But how do we deal with the core problems that make it possible for our farmers to do this? And this means that those responsible for agriculture policy need to understand more how the deficiencies we've seen over the years, including consequences of policies that we've had, are making it worse off for us to survive. We continue, for instance, to encourage irrigation, but how well are we doing in terms of protecting catchments, and as he was saying, the speaker before me, to deal with the overuse of groundwater today, etc. The second point relates to a problem that is again showing the incoherence. Yes, this country continues to experience significant land subdivision, and this is not limited to Kenya. And this subdivision is happening in a rather uncontrolled way, taking on productive areas of agriculture, and is now moving to rangelands where there is a lot of pastoralism with sizes diminishing, and land subdivision taking away critical assets that pastoralists rely on, like watering areas, holding grounds, movement corridors, etc. So if we don't deal with land subdivision, again, at the production level, we are going to see families continuing, households engaging in farming, but are unable to even meet the food requirements for their domestic use, leave alone to bring to market to support the broader elements of livelihoods. And this is very, very critical. And now once if we are able to address some of these we can now worry a lot about the climate impacts. And these have been spoken at length today, so I wouldn't really want to delve into that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert Kibubi, also for keeping the time. And thank you for reminding us that it's really a holistic approach that is needed. And that, if you just look at one aspect, there's the risk that you create a lot of problems on other aspects that are related. So thank you for bringing this up. I would like to give now the floor to David Gikaria. He's the Chair, Committee Environment in the National Assembly. And as has been mentioned various times over the summit, Kenya was one of the first country that passed the Climate Change Act in 2016, which has recently been amended in 2023. And we would like to, or I would like to understand how this new climate change amendment will actually contribute to the ambitious green growth objectives that Kenya has set herself.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First of all, it is true, after we passed the legislation in 2016, that's, I think, the 12th Parliament, and this climate change is something that evolves every day. So through the years, we have come across the changes that needed to be done, and that necessitated the amendments that we did. And these amendments that we did, of course, we had to get in touch with so many other stakeholders who we take their views and opinion on how best we can be able to address this issue of climate change. But going back to your question, is that the focus of afforestation, reforestation, and the nature-based solution as a basis of earning credits will help in the contribution to the achievement of the Kenya Green Growth objective. And what we mean is to say that the mechanism that have been put in place through the Act now, because it has been accented by the President, we have the involvement of the public. We realize the importance of the private sector for them to be able. If you look at the Act when we were doing the amendments, we have increased the number of stakeholders in there's a committee that was informed in that, and we increased the number of the private sector. And we realized that the private sector plays a huge role on matters of climate change. And that aspect itself of bringing in the public and the private entities to transact in the emissions by either emissions of carbon into the atmosphere is a key component that will go to address the green growth. And not forgetting that the government through bilateral and multilateral agreements will also play a huge role in trying to address some of this, to try and bring the aspect of what we are trying to address, and particularly, as you have indicated in the question, on how we can be able to, it will help in the green growth of these aspects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Karia, and I really want to congratulate on this inclusive approach that you have taken, involving all the stakeholders, trying to make it as broad as possible, the importance of nature-based solutions, obviously, but also trying to really involve the private sector and see how money on climate finance can be generated inside the country. And I think this is really revolutionary for Africa, and I'm sure, as in 2016 with the Climate Change Act, a lot of countries will now follow and see how they can integrate elements like the carbon credits into their legislation. And this is actually, again, a very good bridge to my next speakers, who are actually from the private sector. And I would like to ask Dr. Greg Awanda. He's a veterinarian and an entrepreneur in the livestock sector. So Dr. Awanda, your business aims to add value and diversification to the food sector. From your perspective as an entrepreneur, could you just let us know which policies would be helpful to support your business and enable it to grow? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anya, and for this opportunity. Now, in Kenya, we have 77% of our population living in rural areas, and we rely so much on agriculture, so much that it contributes 30% of our GDP. Now, only 21% of Kenya's land is arable. And with this 21%, there's diminishing returns as in terms of harvest, as Dr. Kibugi has mentioned. What's happening is that we've done so much livestock production and crop production in these farms until they're not giving us returns anymore. So with a change of strategy, we have to started embracing technology for production. Specifically in the livestock industry, we are using assisted reproductive techniques to give farmers more returns from their livestock. The problem we're having is that the cost of production using these assisted reproductive techniques is so high, one of them being embryo transfer. Now, in the country, we've had investors putting in money into 4 embryo transfer laboratories to make farmers get high genetic livestock, which can give them higher production figures compared to what we've been keeping. But then all of them have closed down because of the cost of input. Now, our policies that we'd like to be passed is that how do we make inputs for these assisted reproductive technologies are more affordable to farmers. Now, the little land that we have, 21% of our country being arable, how much of it can we increase? The other 79%, again, irrigation is a bit of more expensive to most farmers in the country. And for our livestock to give us better productivity, we also relying on crop production. The 21% arable land cannot feed both the humans and the livestock we have in the country. So we're having farmers who cannot afford to irrigate the land, and they have animals which cannot give them the returns that they're expecting from it, both for their own sustainability, subsistence use, and for the market. So what we are dealing with is, if we can get policies whereby probably get incentives for farmers who are in terms of tax cuts or for inputs to be used in these production systems. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Avanda, and also for highlighting, that financial incentives are necessary, in fact, in order to create a sustainable business that is economically viable. I'm sure we will have a discussion on this later on. And since you have been all very good with time, I'm very positive that there will be some time for Q&A. But I would also like to ask or invite Mr. Mokaya also to the discussion. He's the founder of REMA Agritech, so also an agribusiness. And Mr. Mokaya, we have already talked about policies. Could you just let us know which role green technology actually plays in your business, and how the access to new technologies could be improved? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anja, for just inviting me. I first of all appreciate being part of this discussion, which is very important, not only in Kenya, but in the whole of Africa. So I am representing, let me say, MSMEs right now. And these are the people who contribute up to 40% of the country's GDP. That's an estimation. So I hope what I'm going to say will really help the parliamentarians in Kenya and, of course, all over Africa to actually help us develop green technology. Now, Anya, just as you have said, we are really in an era of developing green technologies. And when I say technologies, I don't mean only digital technologies. There are innovations which have a local backup, which I actually, one of them is one thing that I'm doing at REMA Agritech. I'm just promoting a small, local innovative technology of vertical farming to the women down there to help them produce vegetables and, of course, African leafy vegetables locally and, of course, organically. Now, what this has done to my business, number one, we have
2026. Similarly, a proposal is made to the member states so that the African climate change be institutionalized and be held every 2 years. So let us fix our idea on the next summit in 2 years' time. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Musa Faki, Chair of the AUC, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Honorable Ministers, distinguished delegates. I remain immensely privileged to have the tremendous honor of receiving and hosting you in Kenya for the Africa Climate Summit in Nairobi. Your presence has sent an emphatic signal throughout the world that a new Africa is here and that it means business. Your participation in the summit has further demonstrated your individual as well as our collective dedication to represent our peoples and champion their most important aspirations in every critical forum, regionally, continentally, and globally. The Nairobi Declaration, our common stand and firm resolution, reaffirms our determination and sets the stage for a new phase in the global climate action and sustainable development agenda, giving the future of socio-economic transformation distinct and an affirmative African character. I take none of this for granted, and I commend, honor, and thank you for your tireless effort, steadfast support and willingness to go the extra mile for the sake of a brighter future for Africa and for humanity. As a result of our collective action, there can no longer be any doubt in any part of the world that Africa, humankind's cradle, is also its destiny. Our potential, made up of incomparable young, resilient, and motivated human capital, natural resource wealth, and green energy potential, is going to define the future of global opportunity for unprecedented prosperity and a new paradigm of industrialization that respects the environment and supports our planet's capacity to sustain biodiversity. We have successfully demonstrated that African solutions are not just appropriate for Africa's problems, they are necessary for global well-being. Our Agenda 2063 is an agenda for the benefit of all humankind, and the Africa we want aligns with the planet we need. The cradle of humankind is also its destiny, and Africa is the future, I dare say, of the world. Permit me, Excellencies, to express how profound and proud I am of the quality and scale of what we have been able to accomplish in this inaugural Africa Climate Summit. The boldness, vision, diversity, and thoroughness of the contributions made here in terms of debate, exhibitions, collaborations, and other activities have been deeply encouraging and also inspiring. During this action-focused summit, various stakeholders, including governments, the private sector, multilateral banks, and philanthropists, have made substantial commitments totaling a remarkable $23 billion for green growth, mitigation, and adaptation efforts across Africa. Let us give them a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Notable highlights include a transformative partnership investing $60 million over 2 years in expanding grid access in rural Burundi. A $4.5 billion commitment from the UAE, represented here by my brother, to boost renewable energy. Substantial contribution from the European nations and significant investments from the private sector, entities like Mazda, PowerGen, Leapfrog, Gross Boundary, and Husk Power, emphasizing renewable energy initiatives. The signing of Kenya's green hydrogen strategy with the European Union is expected to drive and accelerate green manufacturing and create thousands of new high-value jobs in addition to attracting large private sector investments. Additionally, there has been a notable increase in adaptation financing, reflecting a deep commitment to Africa's sustainable future and energy systems, aligning with the ambitious Nairobi Declaration. Our youth have not been left behind in the robust conversation that has taken place at this summit. They have provided us with excellent models on how we must approach our date with an African future, by being open to possibility, bold in imagination, and willing to embrace radical and radically transformative technologies, ready to question the things we take for granted and explore new alternatives, and most of all, always seeking opportunities to collaborate locally as well as globally to achieve positive change. Our youth stand out in this summit, and congratulations to them. It is wonderfully appropriate that Africa is a young continent. The future does not merely belong to us. Our youth make us the future. Proceeding on the recognition that the reform of the multilateral financial architecture and the mobilization of adequate financial resources is necessary for progress in our journey into the future, we have challenged the international community to exercise a level of imagination in governance and climate action that is commensurate with the imperative to overcome the immense existential challenges of our time. I am satisfied that we have done very well in our first Africa Climate Summit. I'm delighted that much progress has taken place here, proud that we gave yours best and grateful for your steadfast support and commitment to our collective aspirations and unity. With humility, I thank you for kindly accepting our invitation to attend this summit. I don't take for granted everybody's attendance, big and small, and for your patience throughout the proceedings. I know some of them were long, you had to wait, but you demonstrated unimaginable patience. I want to say thank you very much. It was necessary. Your devotion to Africa's contribution to the transformation of global climate action is exemplary and admirable. I thank the Committee of African Heads of State on Climate Change for giving me the opportunity to champion this phase of our continent's journey to global leadership and in climate action and green industrialization. And I promise that I will do my very best. I also thank the Africa Union and the Africa Union Commission for their unstinting support for my leadership at the CAHOST and for this summit. Musa Faki and your team, Joseka and your team, thank you very much. Much has gone into the preparation as well as the conduct of the actual summit. The political and technical support has been equally vital for our successful management of these, of logistical, technical, diplomatic, financial, and other requirements. The declaration we make to the world today defines and amplifies the African position on the way forward in climate action and the fundamentals that the international community must attend to in order to ensure that humanity's economic and ecological imperatives are effectively, coherently, and sustainably achieved. Going forward, we shall use every available opportunity in the busy multilateral calendar, from the G20 meeting, the United Nations General Assembly in a fortnight, the annual meetings of the World Bank Group and the International Monetary Fund soon thereafter, as well as the COP28 to further prosecute our agenda. After our declaration, let us go home satisfied with a job very well done, proud of our progress we have made, and eager to embark on the next phase of our transformation everywhere on our continent. I know we've come from different corners of this continent. Please go home with your head very high. You have done very well. Congratulations. May God bless you. may God bless our great continent, and may God bless humanity. Asante sana. Thank you very much. Maybe by conclusion, I gave you some lessons. Mambo? Okay, let's start. Jambo. Okay, let me do it again. When I say jambo, you say jambo. Hello, hello. Jambo. Good. When I say mambo, how are things? You say poa. You say things are cool. In fact, poa means cool. Okay, mambo. Mambo. One final lesson. How to say thank you. You say asante. You can add asante sana. Means thank you very much. Can we go? Asante? Very good. So at least you have some lessons from home. I told you this is home, right? So thank you very much. My very best wishes, and God bless you.
Thank you very much. A bigger round of applause, please, as they take their seats. An important moment for Africa. A new Africa is here. Africa means business. One voice, collective action is what we've seen, a new paradigm. Congratulations to all the African leadership that have made the time to come, that have stood forward, that have spoken, that are driving this agenda. Asante sana. And we are all in it together. So, Your Excellency, a little bit of time for responses. We're going to hear from a few, very short. I will be standing by. We'll hear from a few stakeholders. And first and foremost, allow me to welcome Dr. James Mwangi, CEO of Equity Bank, who's going to speak on behalf of the private sector. Here is James. Let's give him a warm round of applause. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, we, the private sector of Africa, take this opportunity offered by the African Climate Summit 2023 to affirm our commitment and support in recognition of what our governments have been able to achieve. We feel, as the private sector, we have a role and a responsibility to work together with our government to deliver on the commitments that the governments have made to the African people. The effort to address climate issues, we will start as a partner and deeply applaud the commitment of the African states to address climate action and to drive green growth and climate finance. We declare our support to the African Declaration and pledge our commitment in very specific areas, namely on climate finance. We commit to establish mechanisms that scale up green investments from the private sector. On green investment, we commit to adopt green and circular business models, designing products that are environmentally friendly and ensure integration of sustainability throughout the value chains. On decarbonization, we commit to actively seek opportunities for nature-based solutions in decarbonization plans and our commitment to net zero, carbon markets, and just transition. On green transition minerals, we commit to invest in green mineral projects and their value chains to provide fair working conditions, ensure equitable wages, and safeguard the health and safety of employees and any informal sector participants. On food and agriculture, we commit to create critical infrastructure such as refrigeration facilities, warehouses to reduce post-production waste and support market and trade opportunities. Your Excellencies, we pledge our commitment to work together with our government as the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. James Mwangi. Next, we're going to hear from a young lady from Sierra Leone. Her name is Philippa Cried Dole, and she speaks on behalf of the children of Africa. Let's give her a warm round of applause, please, as she comes up.
Good morning. I am Philippa Cridle from Sierra Leone, and I'm standing in front of you on behalf of all African children. I'm so happy to stand in front of African leaders. For the past 2 days, His Excellencies, we have had deep discussions, and we all agree that climate change is a child rights crisis, even though we, the children, contribute the least. In Malawi and Mozambique, cyclones have damaged schools and hospitals. In Kenya, Somalia, and South Sudan, drought has caused girls to be sold into early marriage. In Nigeria and Sierra Leone, my country, loss of nature has caused our parents to lose their jobs. Across Africa, people fight for water and land, making families move, forcing children into child labor. We as children don't want adults to feel for us. We want to be included in finding solutions. My fellow children and I propose these solutions. Support children's projects like child-led organization on recycling and tree planting. Climate finance should support school feeding, not just food, but a balanced diet. We also need finance to keep girls in school, not in child marriage. Children are innovative. If you give us technology, we will give you the solutions for our water, agriculture, for our sanitation, and for child protection. And we need children in the climate discussion. We were not included in the planning of the summit. In the future, that has to change. President Ruto, African leaders, let us create an Africa fit for every child. And Santi Wudatenki. My name is Philippa Cridle from Sierra Leone. In addition, can you help me? My fellow children, please join me. On behalf of the children in Africa, we want to present our declaration statement to the President of Kenya. Thank you.
Your Excellency Musa Faki, can I ask you also to come up to receive this, please? Thank you so much. And if I can ask the children, we know you have energy. You can move faster. Let's go. Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. Can I ask the President of Sierra Leone, please? Sir? Please, sir. The young lady is from Sierra Leone, so wonderful to have the President there with her. Thank you. And here you have it, the children of Africa presenting their declaration and making it clear they have the solutions for all the problems that face them. They are innovative, they're faster than us, and we need to give them that space. Thank you so much. Excellent. And now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen,
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, invited guests. My name is Fatou Jeng from the Gambia, and I'm joined by my colleague here, Mr. Yarid Abela from Ethiopia. We are here speaking on behalf of African youth to not only share your urgency for climate action, but to share some of our key demands embedded in our declaration, which reflects our commitment as youth to be a part of the solution in shaping Africa's green growth agenda. Thank you so much, Mr. President, for recognizing the crucial role young people play in climate action. I think this is what we need from our leadership. However, as youth, we call upon the key stakeholders to recognize, promote, and invest in the decision of the Africa Youth Climate Assembly by establishing the Assembly as the principal forum for consolidating and meaningfully enhancing the coordination of youth engagement in climate governance across member states beyond the Africa Climate Summit. And we also urge the key stakeholders to support youth inclusion in advancing Africa's sustainable development goals and the Green Growth Agenda in official continental forums. We also would love to engage the African Union Commission's Youth Division and Department of Sustainable Environment and Blue Economy to integrate the Africa Youth Climate Assembly into their structures, and also aligning with Article 19 of the Africa Youth Charter on Sustainable Development and the protection of our environment.
We also urge the creation of an intergenerational green investment fund to support young-led innovations, actions, and green jobs for African youth. We also request for the lobby of the established United Nations Youth Office to domicile in Africa in line with the structure of global climate institutions. We call for engagement and investment in young people in exploring agricultural potential of Africa. In conclusion, we would like to also seek from key stakeholders to invest in youth-led research, innovations for identifying local climate solutions.
In conclusion, we believe that African youth have showcased their African-led solutions to the global challenge. Invest in us. Thank you so much. And before we just go, Your Excellency, with your permission, we would love to join our colleagues, the children as well, to call you on stage as well, and the AU chairperson, to also have our colleagues from the Africa Youth Climate Assembly team, Ms. Watuti, Mr. Brian Miner, and Alfonso, to join us in sharing the Africa Youth Climate Assembly Declaration. And I saw that my citizenship has been changed to Nigeria, so I am a dual citizen now, a Gambian and a Nigerian.
This is the true treasure of Africa. It's her young people. Let's give them a warmer round of applause. They are the bright light. And here we have them handing over the Youth Declaration to His Excellency Moussa Faki and His Excellency President William Ruto. Thank you so much. Thank you. Next, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to call on the voices of the indigenous peoples. The Ogiek community live in Kenya's Mau and Mount Elgon forests, and some of you will know that these are critical water catchment areas. They are protectors of our forests. They are our forest keepers. A warm welcome to Judy Kipkenda from the Ogiek community. Thank you.
Your Excellency, President of Kenya, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, distinguished excellencies from different countries, our governors, and all other guests. Good morning. My name is Judy Kipkenda from the Ogiek people of Kenya. We, the African indigenous peoples, gathered for the African Climate Summit Pre-Summit Forum from the 1st to 3rd of September 2023 here in Nairobi, Kenya. Hereby, we call on African states, governments, bilateral institutions, and other actors to create a focal point and liaison offices at the African Union headquarters of Africa for indigenous peoples. We call on them to ensure effective and meaningful participation of African indigenous peoples in all development agendas and high-level decision-making processes such as the African Climate Summit. We call for stop to further displacement or forceful evictions of indigenous peoples from their territories. We call on you to affirm effective safeguards and security of land tenure and natural resources to guarantee bare minimum application of free prior informed consent principles on any investments or projects on indigenous peoples' lands and territories as enshrined in the United Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights. We call for the recognition and strengthening of traditional knowledge systems that promote adaptation and resilience through policy frameworks and programs. We call for partnerships that integrate traditional knowledge with conventional scientific knowledge systems and practices. We call that you ensure ease of mobility of Africa indigenous peoples scattered across nation states through policy interventions and mutually negotiated transhumance protocols to help promote climate resilience. We also call that you develop clear guidelines and policy frameworks to cushion indigenous peoples from potential exploitation of dishonest investors, especially on carbon trading. We call that you accelerate meaningful and impactful sustainable development projects and benefit sharing. Establish Indigenous Peoples Climate Resilience Fund to accelerate the realization of sustainable development goals and to mitigate against the impact of climate change on indigenous peoples, in particularly women, children, youth, and persons with disability. In conclusion, we reiterate that although we, the indigenous peoples, contribute the least to global emissions that lead to climate change, we suffer the most from its consequences. We are here with a solution and experiential lessons from Mama Africa. There can be nothing for us without us. Thank you so much. Mr. President, if you would like, I would like to present this to you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that extremely important response. A warm round of applause there as well. Thank you. We'd like to invite a response now on behalf of the ecumenical community and ask Reverend Dr. Lesmore to say a few words.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Africa indeed is a religious continent, and therefore nothing can be done without recognizing the influence of religion in whatever that we do as a people and as a continent. Incidentally, the Africa Climate Summit is taking place within the season of creation, where people of faith and good intentions are invited to pray and take action for our common home that is bleeding and groaning because of human actions driven by greed. We, as a people of faith, we recognize that matters of climate change are matters of life and death and cannot be commodified, cannot be objectified, and cannot be politicized. And we are driven by that. And that is how, as people of faith, we gather during this summit, reminding ourselves that the welfare of the earth is our welfare. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Nairobi Declaration for us, having reviewed it, is both bitter and sweet aspects, which presents fears and hopes of the future. We as people of faith that are often the first respondents in crisis situations, including the ones that are caused by climate change, are wrestling with the question whether there is honesty and truthfulness in the entire process of negotiation. We are worried that the sweet part of the declaration, which is the call to action, will be subsumed by exigencies of time and many other aspects. Your Excellencies, as people of faith, we continue to pray and act rightly for the common good of all, while calling for greater transparency in climate finance management. It is greatly going to be beneficial if a mechanism like what was used during the Global Fund to combat HIV, malaria, and TB, the country coordinating mechanism, is very important, and if we can institute that, all the stakeholders within a country will find space in climate financing that will lead to greater adaptation and resilience for our people. May God bless Africa, our home, and our future. I thank you. Mr. President, I also have a text of sermon for you.
Some additional evening reading, Your Excellency. I'd like to invite a response now on behalf of civil society, Dr. Mithika Mwenda with the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance.
Dear Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I'm honored once again to address this all-important summit. Each of us, when we came here, aimed for an outcome that would be transformative and reflective of the urgency of addressing the climate crisis based on latest science, the imperatives of climate justice, and for Africa, recognition of the continent as the special needs and the circumstances region. Throughout the 2 days, we have listened to our leaders and all key stakeholders. We have no doubt, listening to our leaders, that they understand the existential threats posed by the climate emergency, and in totality, hearing from them, we have some convergence on very critical issues. And one of it is enhanced contribution by those who have caused the climate crisis to honor their commitment by deeply cutting their emissions, because that is where the biggest problem is, and ceasing from transferring the burden of action to the victims of their actions in the name of forced solutions to climate change. And so, also, providing, which is very important, adequate, predictable, and easily accessible finance, particularly for adaptation and resilience building in Africa. At this critical moment, Excellencies, we urge you to prioritize the suffering of the people of Africa, regardless of this outcome. We implore to act with one vision and speak one voice at the upcoming COP28 in UAE, and really urge you to really reflect on what is happening to our people. I want to conclude by saying that time is of essence. The scientific evidence is compelling, the window of opportunity is closing, and the stakes are too high. We must act swiftly, together, for a sustainable, ecologically just, equitable future for Africa and the world. And Your Excellency, following the protocol of others, I would urge that I present also a text, though I know we are presented and submitted our document. Thank you, Your Excellency, for accepting to receive me.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite a response now on behalf of parliamentarians, the Honourable Charity Kathambi Chepkwony, Chair of the Parliamentary Caucus on Climate Change.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya, Your Excellencies, guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Charity Kathambi Chepkwony, Member of Parliament from Kenya, from part of Rift Valley. Your Excellency, as members of Parliament from Africa, this is our first comment. Climate change is real. We are now here to act. As parliamentarians from Pan-Africa Parliament, Africa Regional Parliament, various national parliaments gathered at the Parliamentary Dialogue at the sidelines of the Africa Climate Summit that was on 31st to 1st September. We sat, Your Excellency, and these are remarks of the legislators from Africa. Number one, we urge the Africa leaders to prioritize climate change adaptation in their engagement in the global and regional processes and dialogue to address the climate crisis, particularly during the COP28. Number two, we call for increased support and solidarity from international community, especially the developed countries, to provide adequate, predictable and accessible financing, technology transfer, and the capacity building for Africa adaptation effort in line with the Paris Agreement goal of mobilizing US $100 billion annually by 2020. Our number three call, Your Excellencies, is prioritizing the rapid operationalization of the Santiago Network on loss and damage as means to catalyze technical assistance to developing countries that are vulnerable. And Your Excellency, our number four, we stress the need to more than triple adaptation finance for Africa, largely in form of grants, as current levels are insufficient to meet the estimated adaptation costs in developing countries in Africa. Number five, Your Excellency, we request for support to finalize the implementation of the global goal of adaptation under the Paris Agreement, which aims to enhance adaptive capacity, strengthen resilience, and reduce vulnerability to climate change in a measurable, reportable, and viable manner. And our number six, Your Excellency, as legislators from Africa, we appeal for enhanced cooperation and coordination among Africa countries and the region to share best practices, mobilizing climate funds to scale advance across border programs. And our number seven, as legislators from Africa, Your Excellency, we are committed as legislators to effectively execute our legislative roles, oversight, and the budgetary mandate to ensure that Africa has the right legal and the policy frameworks and the needed resources to aid climate change in response interventions in Africa. And our number 10, as legislators, Your Excellency, we are calling upon Africa Union member states to ensure that members of Parliament are part of the national delegation in various national areas. And lastly, Your Excellency, we applaud you as the President of Kenya for having this Africa's Climate Summit, for also having time and coming to launch our Africa meeting, which we had with the legislators in South Africa. And Your Excellency, thank you so much as legislators. We appreciate for getting this platform where we get possession to share our ideas, our challenges, and the best practices. And lastly, Your Excellency, it is also good in this forum I say that Kenya is the first country in Africa continent to have a Climate Change Act 2016. And lastly, Your Excellency, you have also managed to do the new Amendment Bill 2023 in inclusion of the carbon credits and the trading. Thank you, Your Excellency. Sir, allow me to submit what members of Parliament have told me to submit to you.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, you're getting your steps in. But Musa Faki is getting away lightly with no extra homework. So it's been noted, Excellency. Now I'd like to invite a response from the World Meteorological Organization and ask Piteri Talas, the Secretary General of WMO, to make a few remarks.
Your Excellency, the following is the statement from the World Meteorological Organization, which is a special agency of United Nations for authoritative voice of weather, climate, and water. In light of the increasing impact of weather, climate, and water extremes over the African continent due to climate change, the most vulnerability of the continent and the need for the whole Africa to urgently adapt to the impacts of climate change. The World Meteorological Organization supports strongly the development of the Nairobi Declaration, and also strongly committed to supporting the development of capacities for the generation of sound and impact-based information services for climate change adaptation and mitigation. In particular, WMO, together with the relevant UN agencies through the UN Early Warning for All, which is commissioned by the UN Secretary-General Mr. Guterres to cover all the nations with early warning services by 2027, in the next 5 years. In supporting the strengthening of capacities of all the nations to generate and utilize the early warning services. In response, WMO, with the African Union Commission and other UN agencies, have just launched at this summit in the past 2 days the African Regional Climate Statement and the African Regional Early Warning for All Action Plan to enable information for supporting national, regional, sustainable social-economic development. African solutions need a global support and also global contributions. Your Excellency, to garner the essential political support and provide strategic leadership for the early warning for all, WMO would like to confer the WMO Continental Champion role to His Excellency, the President William Ruto. And this is a great opportunity and also great honor. And I do believe this will provide the great support for the African climate solution. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Your Excellency, the certificate from World Meteorological Organization. Thank you so much.
Your Excellency Moussa Faki, please also come and receive the certificate for all your hard work as well. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'd like to now invite a ministerial response and ask the head of the delegation, His Excellency Mr. Kumaran Periasamy, the Additional Secretary of Economic Relations and Development Partnership, Ministry of External Affairs of the Government of India, to say a few words.
His Excellency Moussa Faki, Chairperson, African Union Commission, His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, President of Kenya, Excellencies, Heads of State and Heads of Government, Ministers, dignitaries from various international organizations, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to represent the Government of India at this historic Africa Climate Summit. The conversations over the past 2 days are an important reminder for all of us that the pathway to effective and enduring global climate action goes through Africa and with Africa. That developing countries, and particularly Africa, lie at the front line of our response to global warming, climate justice, climate adaptation and mitigation, food security, and biodiversity conservation. On behalf of the Government of India, I would like to congratulate President William Ruto for leading from the front for Africa on this vital issue, and applaud the Africa Climate Summit for underscoring the salience of Africa in addressing the climate conundrum ahead of COP28 in the UAE. I extend our congratulations to Kenya and to the African Union on the adoption of the Nairobi Declaration that crafts an agenda for AU ambition and action. India will work with the African Union on forging effective international climate action that works for developing countries and for the African continent. While developing countries have contributed little to the climate-related challenges that we face today, we remain disproportionately affected by climate-induced disasters. Ladies and gentlemen, as this summit closes, another summit hosted by India is about to begin in New Delhi on 9th September that will bring together the G20 countries. Climate change has been a key priority of India's G20 presidency, and it will find ample reflection at the summit. Ambitious outcomes adopted by the G20 towards climate action include the G20 high-level principles on lifestyles for sustainable development, the G20 high-level principles for a sustainable and resilient blue economy, the G20 high-level voluntary principles on hydrogen, G20 voluntary action plan on doubling the global rate of energy efficiency improvement by 2030. We look forward to unveiling more initiatives at the G20 summit in Delhi. Excellencies, it is India's belief that the Global South has to be a much larger and more vocal participant in finding solutions to intractable global issues. While most of us resoundingly endorse the urgent call for climate action, the ability of developing countries to take effective climate action is interlinked with the availability of means of implementation, such as climate finance, transfer of technology, and capacity building. The world needs to come together to make available accessible, adequate, and affordable climate finance to the developing countries, including Africa, for effective climate action and meeting their NDCs. Developing countries cannot deploy low-carbon climate technologies at scale unless a facilitative global technology transfer regime is in place. Recognizing this, India has undertaken a number of initiatives to fight against climate change. India counts on Africa as an invaluable partner and ally in these efforts and initiatives that can help harvest our intersecting opportunities and address our shared challenges. President Ruto welcomed us to a brave new future in his address here. It is a vision of the future that resonates with us, a future that recognizes the interconnections that bind us, and a future where our potential as countries and as people have an opportunity to find their due expression. I close by saying you have India's steadfast partnership in this endeavor. Asante Nisana, thank you and namaskar.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, today Africa speaks with one voice in telling the world, here we stand and change you must. Africa is the future of the world, and we are all so proud of the promises made and the progress in the Nairobi Declaration and the $23 billion in commitments. Congratulations once again to all our leaders, especially to our President, Mheshimiwa Rais, for your leadership and your commitment. We now formally close the Africa Climate Summit, and we will, as you leave the room, play the especially commissioned summit song. So on behalf of all of Kenya, thank you so much, all of you, for coming here for this extremely important and critical conference at a critical juncture in the world today. Asante sana. I'll hand you over now to Mike Gitonga.
Thank you, Zain. Mine is just to give you the exit protocols as we now proceed to the KICC courtyard for final remarks to all and sundry and to the stakeholders. So we'll kindly allow the excellencies to leave through the VVIP exit. Then the rest of us, I'll kindly request that we use the right as we all now proceed to the KICC courtyard. Let's kindly settle and allow our excellencies to leave first. Then we proceed for the final part of this in the KICC courtyard. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, your excellencies, as we now proceed to the KICC courtyard. I'll also request that we have all those doors open to allow all of us to leave seamlessly from that end. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the final day of the grand inaugural Africa Climate Summit. Over the past 2 days, debates have been had, discussions have been had, reforms have been undertaken, and today is D-Day. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, here we stand, and change you must. At this point in time, why don't we put our hands together as I now welcome His Excellency Musa Faki, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, to take his chair on the stage, also joined by His Excellency the President
and the new architecture when it comes to climate financing, as well as inclusion of women, youth and indigenous communities when it comes to matters of climate, especially when it comes to issues of the benefits, as well as a push by the United Nations there to have the operationalization of the loss and damage agreement of COP27, and looking forward to COP28 there, that is to be held towards the end of this year in December in Dubai, UAE. Just to give you a recap of what the 3-day inaugural Africa Climate Summit has been all about. Kenya has played host to that in that particular summit, and just now it is concluded. And some of the take-homes are in regard to how Africa will continue to harness its full potential when it comes to its mineral resources, as well as better transformation of the climate architecture when it comes to tapping into available international available funds there towards climate adaptation and mitigation. the president, who is President William Ruto there, as well as the AU chairperson, Musa Faki, have received quite a number of declarations there. One of them is to thank the AU, saying that this would not have been possible if the AU had not fully supported Africa's take and direction towards inclusion and renegotiation of terms where Africa is concerned when it comes to matters of climate change. President William Ruto has also gone further to thank all the heads of state, 15 of them in number, who have graced this particular occasion. Yesterday, they're reiterating their commitment towards the transformation of Africa when it comes to matters of climate adaptation and mitigation. Also in this particular closing ceremony, we have seen President William Ruto receive several declarations there from children who echoed the fact that they want to be included in this particular cause of action when it comes to tackling climate change. The youth, while giving their declaration, what they put forth is also issues of inclusion. They're saying that the future needs to be assured and they need to be there to be part of the policies that are going to inform how the future will look like for them, insisting that they're not leaders of tomorrow but leaders of now. We also had the private sector there, led by James Mwangi there, saying that indeed the conversations were quite fruitful and that the private sector was ready to take up a leading role in as far as matters of climate adoption is concerned, clearly focusing on clean energy. We also had the religious section also saying that this particular summit has been good for them because a climate crisis is also a humanitarian crisis that needs to be addressed, and looking at the social economic aspects of communities. Talking about communities, the president has also received the declaration from indigenous communities who for long have been decrying being left out when it comes to the benefits of having these particular mitigations and adaptations. We also had a commitment from the global south, and just reiterating what the
Na mtazamaji, sasa umewadia ule wakati ambao tumekuwa tukiusubiri kwa muda, kwa siku tatu sasa, ambapo ni wakati sasa wa rais akiandamana na marais wengine wa bara Afrika kuweza kutia sahihi na kutangaza mwafaka ambao umekuwa ukijadiliwa kwa siku hizi tatu za kongamano la mabadiliko ya tabia nchi. Kama unaweza kuona hapa nyuma yangu mtazamaji, ni kuwa ni waigizaji tu ambao wapo katika eneo hili ambapo sasa wanakaribisha wa marais, na vile vile kama unaweza ona hapo ni mama wa taifa Rachel Ruto akiwa na mkewe naibu rais